on to the second phase, which is after treatment. And this is what I call the, oh crap, now what? Actually, I call it something worse, but I'm trying to be polite today. You second guess your treatment options. Did I choose the right option? Should I have gone with something else? Did I make the right choice? And you're not actively fighting. So it's like, oh my God, is it going to come back? Is the cancer hiding somewhere inside of me and I'm not doing anything to fight it? One of the major features of this stage is, there's even a word for it, scan anxiety. You have the stress and the anxiety every time you see a doctor, every time you have a test, you have a scan. Both times I was diagnosed with cancer, I felt great. And yet cancer was growing inside of me. It's not seeing the doctor, having the test, it's the fear of the unknown. It's that living in limbo, not knowing what's next. When is the next shoe going to drop? You don't know whether to go ahead and schedule your vacation for next year or whether you're going to be having to go through treatment again. Now, the article that I read said that this phase lasts for about 5 years, which kind of makes sense because that's usually how long doctors tell you before you're cured. And then you go into the long-term survivorship. But I know that word cure is just an illusion. I had a cancer reoccurrence after 23 years. I don't care what the doctors say. I know I will never be cured. The cancer can come back at any time, and it can affect any single person in this room. You don't know. I don't care how well you feel, cancer could be growing inside of you. And I will live with that for the rest of my life. And if you've not had cancer, you don't know what that fear feels like. Now, with my second cancer experience, I was much more prepared financially, but boy, when that cancer hit the second time, I knew I was one medical emergency away from bankruptcy. So in May of 2012, I was glued to my computer waiting to hear what the Supreme Court ruled on the Affordable Care Act. And when it was announced that it was upheld, I literally, and I'm not joking, I literally cried for a half hour. It still affects me emotionally. Because now I knew that I could not be denied insurance from having a pre-existing condition. And I was no longer not poor enough to be able to get some help from somebody. So with this announcement, my friend Beth and I both canceled our individual policies. And we applied for the PCIP. Now, that was scary in itself because you had to wait 6 months. You had to be without insurance for 6 months. Now, I also, besides having cancer, I have a whole list of medical problems. I know I don't look like it, but I have a lot of medical problems. I'm a high user of medical services. And to go 6 months without insurance was really scary. And it was just like, please, God, don't let anything happen. So I get on the PCIP, and the first thing I did was I had a colonoscopy. With my previous insurance, that was a $3,000 out of pocket. And several doctors had told me, you need to have a colonoscopy. You've had cancer twice at early ages. And I couldn't afford it. So I had a colonoscopy. Luckily, that was fine. The next thing I did is I had foot surgery that I had been putting off for about 4, 5, 6 years because I couldn't afford it. A couple months later, I went into anaphylactic shock, and I spent 2 days in the hospital, and that medical bill was $40,000. Now, with the PCIP, my monthly premium was still $500, but my deductible had gone down to $1,500. That was affordable. If I did not have the PCIP, that last medical emergency probably would have pushed me over the edge financially. Now, I mentioned my friend Beth. Beth was my first friend that I met at Gilda's Club. We were about the same age, and we were both self-employed, and we both had individual insurance. And when Beth was diagnosed with ovarian cancer, her insurance company said, oh, geez, we don't cover cancer. Beth and her husband spent $100,000 on her treatment. And when the Supreme Court ruling came out of upholding the Affordable Care Act, Beth was diagnosed with a reoccurrence. So she had nothing to lose by canceling her individual policy because it wasn't going to cover anything anyway. We both went to the same oncology practice, and it's a father-son. I saw the father, she saw the son. And they really did work with her. They negotiated with the hospital so that a PET scan was only $400 cash. They treated her with the least expensive drug they could get away with until she could get insurance. 1 week before her PCIP was effective, Beth was deathly ill. And they wanted to put her in the hospital, and she said, "No, I will bankrupt my husband." Beth died several months later. I don't know if Beth's outcome would have been any different, but I do know that Beth suffered physically, emotionally, and financially, and she would have had a much better policy of life if she had not been screwed by her insurance company. One of the most important aspects of the Affordable Care Act was stopping the most egregious acts of the insurance companies. We can't afford to go backwards. When I was originally asked to speak to you in October, I had a very different speech. And at that time, I was so hopeful that one of the candidates' proposals to extend Medicare down to 55 would pass. And I was like, oh, thank God. But now I'm 3 years, 3 months, and 22 days away from Medicare, if it still exists in its form. Beth and I represent the millions of people who just aren't poor enough. We're not rich enough, we're not old enough, we're not young enough. And so many of the options to replace the Affordable Care Act just don't help us at all. You know what? But we certainly are sick enough. When the Affordable Care Act was first proposed, there was talks of death panels. Let me tell you what a death panel is. It's high pool risk for people like me, without fully supporting it financially so that we're vying for treatment. There will be death panels because we won't be able to afford the coverage. So when you have decisions to make, I hope that you will think of me and Beth and realize that your decisions not only affect the financial aspect of our lives, but also the quality of our life, and for many of us, it means life or death. Thank you very much.